Well, Jeremy, congratulations on this Fear Street series. You have no idea how much it's the talk of the past few weeks.
Yeah, thank you. First off, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I have a sliver of an idea just based on like Instagram and the reception on Instagram, and it's I think best case scenario. I think we're all pretty happy.
Now, is this your first foray into the genre of horror movies yourself?
Yeah, actually, I you're right. It is. I actually didn't even realize that, but yeah, this is my first foray into horror, and this is my first foray into a studio trilogy.
Well, most excellent. So, what initially attracted you or drew you into a project like this? Then, something like Fear Street. What did you say going? You know what? I have to do this.
At first, when the opportunity came my way, as an actor, it's like you spend, 8 to 10 years struggling. That's kind of a rule of thumb. Every now and then there's an exception, but rule of thumb is it takes 10 years to get your sort of big break, So for me, it was about 8 years of just doing so much low budget stuff, really independent stuff, no like non-paying stuff. And in those 8 years, it's like you get so many opportunities that come your way, like, oh, audition for this big project. And you kind of just get used to like not booking the big ones, So when this came my way in 2019, it was, untitled horror trilogy. It was a studio at the time. It was 20th Century Fox. I was like, oh wow, this is a big opportunity. But at that point, you don't think much about it. I'm cool. The first round was a self tape. I'm gonna do my best, of course, and then I'm just gonna send it off, and I'm not gonna think about it ever again. And then I got called back, and Carmen Cuba, our fantastic casting director, she made me feel like I had a fighting chance. She's so great. And, Lee Janiak, the director, was sort of like fighting for me after my first audition. I was like, oh, wow. Like the director for this trilogy is fighting for me. Like, this is crazy. Then I started actually like just getting excited by the notion of such a big opportunity, and then they sent me the scripts, and I read them all in one night, all 3 scripts. It was like, I stayed up all night, and I was like, oh, wow, these are actually like really good studio movies. Like they're not crap, there was so much heart in the scripts, and I was just immediately smitten. Like I was sold. Like I needed to be a part of it.
Now, when you auditioned for Fear Street, did you know you were auditioning for a couple characters, or did they intended you to do one, or you had in the mindset of one character?
My first audition, I auditioned for the role of Simon, which is now played by Fred Heckinger. And then for my callback, Carmen Cuba was like, I like you, but I think you're better off for this character named Peter, who will also be Caleb. And at first I was like, okay, whatever. I don't know. It's whatever. I'm happy to be here. And at first, like before they sent me the scripts for my callbacks, it was just like, okay, you're auditioning for 2 characters, Peter, Caleb. I was like, it was kind of overwhelming. I'm like, I don't know how to prepare for 2 different characters for this like big audition. So I kind of just treated them as the same role, because you could tell based on like the lines in the audition scenes that they were both not good dudes. Like they're both kind of like scumbaggy type characters. So I'm like, just for my sake, I'm going to treat them as one role. I'm going to like just pour all my heart and soul into like bringing one character to life, and they just happen to have 2 different names. And then when I got the scripts, I finally understood. In 1666, you're sort of you see this 17th century character named Caleb, but you're seeing it through Dina's eyes as Sarah Fier, and she just projects it as Peter. That sounds really confusing, but if you've seen it, you get it.
No, I totally get it. I'm curious, when you finally got the role and they actually started the production, was 1994 and 1666, was that filmed back to back? Which was first?
Yeah, they were filmed back to back. We did 1994 first, and then we went straight into 1666, and then they shot 1978.
Did you feel kind of left out that you weren't in 1978 per se, or you just kind of glad because it was? I mean, it is 2 movies. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, I was kind of. I mean, I understood the structure of the stories. Like I knew 1978 largely had a completely different cast from 1994, so I understood why I wasn't in it. But when we wrapped 1666 and everyone was getting ready for 1978, I was like, oh man, I feel kind of left out. But I kept my cool. I'm like, oh, cool. Congratulations, everybody. But deep down, I was like, man, I want to stay.
Well, let's start with 1994 because the funniest thing about 1994 to me is that the 90s is now a period piece, and you're obviously too young to really remember the 1990s, and I lived through it, and sometimes I feel like I'm still dressed up like in 90s. But how was it acting? In 1994, during that period, with wearing Letterman jackets, being a jock at a football game, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was born in the 90s, but I was a pretty little kid through the 90s. But I barely remember it. But I remember it enough to where, especially like the opening scene when it's the mall in 1994, and there's, they're drinking an Orange Julius. I'm like, oh, I remember being a kid, and my grandma would always get us Orange Julius's at the mall. And it felt so period appropriate when I read that in the script. And yeah, being there, I'm in a couple different scenes in 1994, and, with the Letterman and like just the clothes, the way they fit it's so different from how we dress now. But 90s fashion is like just now making a comeback, I guess. And looking around, especially like the girls' costumes, I'm like, this is really cool now. I look down, I'm like, this is preposterous. I would never wear this. But the girls, I'm like, this is really fashionable nowadays. But the 90s were just far enough away where I guess like, fashion is cyclical. It's like, we're back. Like the 90s is hot, So you watching it, did it feel very authentically 90s to you?
Well, it does, and that's because the mall, just the mall scene by itself, B. Dalton books and Suncoast video and all those stuff.
Yeah.
Those are the places I visited at the mall, and now indoor malls are like totally dying off. Like
totally, it's kind of sad actually. I heard on the radio a few years ago, and I don't know if it's still true, but I guess like the last freestanding mall like that, like we all went to when we were like teenagers, I guess the last one in America was built in like 2011, and one hasn't been built since. And like that's such like the Amazon culture that we live in,
I know it's a little bit crazy in its own way, but you seem to enjoy playing Peter because Peter has a pretty, I want to say he had a pretty big role in 1994 because he is in a few scenes. But tell me I want to call it the chase scene. Were you a big part of that, or did they actually have like someone else donning the mask for you?
Yeah, you're asking the good questions because that was not me at all. That was we have a great stunt guy named Cole Eckert who was my double for 1994. And he did all the driving, and I happened to hear that they like had just shot those scenes. I'm like, oh, they already did that? I guess in my mind, I thought I was going to be there. I'm like, oh man, I get it, because no one's going to trust me driving. But that was another moment. I'm like, oh, I kind of missed out. But when I went back to do like ADR, which is like the voiceover, this was just a couple months ago. That was when I finally saw the chase scene for the first time. So then they're adding in all my voice. I'm just like screaming insults at like the Shadyside bus. But seeing it for the first time, I'm like, yeah, people are going to think this is me. So I guess I'm okay with that.
The funny thing, just by talking to you so far, I feel like I'm not even talking to Peter or Caleb at this point. You're like way opposite of those characters.
I'm going to call that a win. Yeah, it's funny because a lot of people on Instagram or even, Netflix held 3 really like lovely premieres for all 3 movies. People kept coming up to me at the premiere, like asking for like a photo and stuff like that, which was so fun and exciting. And after I would take a picture with every single person, they would be like, oh my God, you're so like not like your character. And I'm like, thank God, right? Like no one wants to be around Peter.
that is true, especially in a film like this, because he's I'm just going to call it straight. He's a jerk.
Yeah, I'll double down. He's a scumbag.
Now let's move on to the other film that you actually filmed, was 1666, which is also a period piece of, we're talking about nearly 400, 500. I should be studying math a little bit better, but anyway.
you're close enough.
How was it like, wearing those period outfits and going into, that set production?
Yeah, so the 90s felt like not so much of a reach because it was not, I guess it was that long ago, but for you and for me, it doesn't feel like that long ago. 1600s was such a far cry from the world that we live in. So that was like, I did so much research as far as like Salem witch trials and like 17th century, like early puritanical America, because I knew, I mean, I was a terrible history student. I knew nothing about the period. And, I read the play The Crucible and I watched the movie The Crucible, and I tried to watch as many period appropriate things as I could. But being there, we had a wonderful costume designer named Amanda Ford, who like her and her team like handmade all of our like 17th century clothes. And they were like so uncomfortable in like the most authentic way. And like, the production design crew, they built us a village in the middle of the woods just outside of Atlanta. And that's where we shot everything. So it was not hard to like believe it. They almost like made my job as an actor as easy as humanly possible, because you're doing such long days, like day after day after day. You start to lose your mind a little bit. It's so hot. It's so humid. There's bugs everywhere. You start to go, God, have I always lived in this village? Like, I feel like I have. So that was like, I mean, huge shout out to the studio for, doing it that way. It was a dream come true as an actor. It felt really easy to buy the circumstances.
Now, tell us about the look of Caleb. You had a little bit of long hair. Because you're a clean cut, good looking guy there, and he looked like he just was sleeping in the gutter somewhere.
Yeah.
Tell us about transforming into Caleb back then.
Yeah, it looks cool on camera, and it looks great on camera. First day when they put the wig on me, I've never had long hair like that. Like I've always had kind of shortish hair. So seeing myself in the mirror, it was kind of like, oh, I look like my mother. Like I look just like my mom. And in fact, John Taro, the head of the hair department, every day when he would put the wig on me, he'd be standing behind me and he would put it on me in the mirror and he'd go, oh, there she is. There's Tina. That's my mom's name. So it was bizarre at first, but you're seeing it on camera, I'm like, okay, it looks good, looks believable. And they cover you in fake dirt, and it's so hot and humid, so you're just constantly sweaty. So yeah, we all kind of look like we crawled out of the gutter. And after a while, I just got used to seeing myself look like such a mess.
The one thing that I noticed is that you did an accent in this film. You must be proud of it, because I know for a lot of actors that those are the challenges, and when they have the opportunity to do accents, they love it. Talk about coming up with that accent for it. And for those people who don't know, what accent is it?
It's I guess the name of the accent is Modified Early Modern English. And I keep giving shout outs to everyone involved, but I have to, because like everyone did such a great job on this film. And we had a very lovely dialect coach named Charlotte Fleck, who she's worked with a bunch of like amazing actors, and her CV is like really impressive. But I'm not an accent guy. I've always just been inherently bad at accents. I can't sing to save my life. Like, in fact, like it's like a joke with me and my friends, like, and any accent I do just ends up being like Swedish for some reason. So going into the 1600s, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to ruin this movie because I'm going to be the guy with the Swedish accent. That's like going to be out of place. But, Charlotte was great. She gave us so many like wonderful, like coaching sessions, and gave us so much material to like listen to over and over and over and practice. So on the day, like I felt very confident actually in my accent, which was a lovely surprise for myself. And I think everyone did such a great job. But it's a bizarre accent, because it's sort of English, it's sort of Irish, it sort of sounds Canadian at times. So it was a really weird accent, because I guess, we don't really know how they sounded back then. But Charlotte, our dialect coach, she came up with this one, and she's like, I think this is the closest we can humanly get. And I think everyone did a great job.
I think everyone did. And speaking of everyone, how was the working with the rest of the cast? Did you guys do activities to trying to create that camaraderie between all of you?
Yeah, luckily we shot these movies in 2019, so pre-pandemic, pre-COVID. We weren't subjected to like being locked in our hotel rooms, which is great. And I came a few weeks late when we started shooting 1994, and the whole main cast, like Olivia and Kiana and Julia and Fred and everyone, they were so kind, and they kind of like welcomed me into the friendship circle with open arms, which was great, because going in, you never know. Like sometimes things are like really cliquey, and sometimes there's like the cool kids and the not cool kids. But this was not one of those sets. Everyone was like so cool and friendly. No one had any sort of like ego about them. And we were in Atlanta, and none of us were from Atlanta, and we would go to the movies, go to the mall. And yeah, it was kind of like the greatest summer camp experience ever, because we're doing the thing that we've always dreamed of doing. And we're in Atlanta, and we're in, a really fantastic hotel. And it was cool. It was, I'm going to look back on it fondly for the rest of my life, I think.
It sounds like you had a lot of fun. Now, for you, Jeremy, how did you get into acting for yourself? I mean, I read your IMDb. It say that you're extremely introvert and shy, but we can't tell that from this interview.
You're doing a really good job at making me feel comfortable, so I think the credit goes to you, Gig. Yeah, I was a terribly shy kid. Like I wasn't one of those kids that always dreamed of being an actor. Like I didn't do like community theater. I didn't do school plays or anything like that. Like the last thing I wanted, like anytime I had to like get up in front of the class and speak or something, I was just mortified. The last thing I wanted was people looking at me. And I graduated high school and like my grades were terrible. Like I was like not going to college. That was obvious to everybody. And I sort of just graduated high school and I had no sort of like game plan, but I started working at the mall because, hey, that's what you do when you graduate high school. And someone I knew at the mall, because I grew up in Southern California, someone I knew like did background acting, and she's like, "Oh, you should watch Pretty Little Liars tonight. I'm going to be on it." And I've never met anyone that was on TV, so I was like, "What? That's crazy! That's the coolest thing I've ever heard." And she's like, "Yeah, like if you're ever tired of working at the Sunglass Hut, go sign up with Central Casting. You can do background acting. It's easy. Anybody can do it." And I was like, "Yeah, dude, screw this Sunglass Hut nonsense. I'm gonna go be a background actor." And I started doing background acting. My very first job was on one of those like procedural shows like NCIS or something like that. And it was on a soundstage in LA. And I walked onto the set and I was just like, I've already used this word, but I'm going to use it again. I was smitten. I looked around and I'm like, this is incredible. Like there's so much like excitement and electricity in the air. And everyone on set like seemed to be just so enthusiastic about the project. And I'm like, man, this is cool. Like I've never been in a workplace with people that are like so enthusiastic. And I kind of immediately hated background acting because you're kind of bottom of the barrel and it's not a good time. But I love being on set so much. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna try to be an actor. I want to be a real actor. I want to be front and center. I'm gonna do it. And I decided sort of then and there, like I'm gonna be an actor. And I had never acted a day in my life, but I made that decision and I just immediately got like really serious about it and never looked back. And here I am, whatever, a decade later, and I love acting. Like it's such a weird thing to look back on, like my childhood. Like I would never have guessed that this is what I'd be doing, but I'm constantly reminded like how much I'm so lucky to be a part of the Fear Street movies, and I have some really fantastic credits under my belt now that I'm so grateful for. And it's crazy, like life is a trip.
I'm snickering is because you used to work at a Sunglass Hut, and I feel like Sunglass Hut and GameStops are going to be those next stores from the malls that are going to disappear, and we'll start making movies about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Jerry, before I let you go, one of the things that people will always be curious is like, what kind of roles do you seek now after you got Fear Street out of the way? And I know you're also in a big TV series called The Mosquito Coast. Could you also comment about that?
Yeah, Fear Street was, it opened so many doors for me professionally, and I'm grateful to everyone involved for so many reasons. But I left Fear Street, and then I signed on to do a small part in the Apple TV show, The Mosquito Coast, which was kind of its own separate dream come true, working with Justin Theroux and Rupert Wyatt, the director. And then all of a sudden, like the pandemic hit, and I was like, oh, wow, like I was finally starting to build traction, and then the world's going to shut down. Like that's just my luck. But my wife and I, we kind of put our heads together, and we've always wanted to write a script together. And we used the lockdown as an opportunity to like sit down and write a script. And we ended up spending like 10 months writing a script that we're super proud of now. And at the beginning of this year, we actually got it financed. We got it fully financed, and we have like 2 lovely financiers that are backing it for us. And we hired some other producers to help us out. And like now we have a director and a cinematographer, and we're right in the middle of casting. And we're going to start shooting that in September. And that's kind of like my dream, my dream project is writing something with my wife. We're getting it financed. I'm going to play like the lead role in it. It's kind of like a personal story to me. And it's like, we're doing it. Like we're sort of like helming the ship now, which is really exciting. And yeah, I would love for you guys to, you know, stay tuned for that. It's called Way Down Bundy, and we have big hopes for it.
Most excellent. Well, Jeremy, it's been a pleasure, and when Way Down on Bundy gets along, send us a notice, and we'll talk about that movie.
Absolutely, I'd be honored.
Terrific. Well, Jeremy, hey, congratulations for Fear Street. Thank you for speaking to us, and have a nice rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you, Gig. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. And yeah, I appreciate you. If things go accordingly, I'll see you again.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye.
All right, take care.